November 9th. I made the mistake when I sent out an email on the mailing list saying that it was Monday, November 8th, so I'm sorry about that. That was a goof. But thanks for joining us online and here or later via YouTube. So tonight we have with us a few folks here at Dallas Makerspace. I want to welcome Ebony Jackson and Pratik Patel. So Pratik's been following us on Google Plus, and that's awesome. So he said he's here because he does Perl from time to time in a professional capacity. And I think he and Ebony are going to jump into the hangout here pretty soon. So you'll get to see them. John Dexter said he was coming on in tonight, but he's not here yet. He might roll in a little while. And our other coordinator in DFW Perl Mongers leadership, John Fields, is on vacation. So he won't be here. He's on vacation with his awesome family. So I hope you're enjoying yourself, John. But the reason why, or at least the topic that we wanted to focus on tonight, was the surprise announcement that I made on the mailing list last week. And that was that we're going to do another hackathon. So that everybody understands what that means, at least in terms of what we have done, is that in the winter of 2013, so, you know, a little over, well, more than a year ago, we did a hackathon, and it was a big contest. You know, sometimes the objective of a hackathon is to solve a problem where everybody come together and work, and we're going to eliminate as many bugs as we possibly can in a given code base, and we'll all collaborate, and then at the end of the day, you know, we're king of the world, you know, because we all work together. Well, it wasn't that kind of hackathon. It was a hackathon where it was a competition, and the competition was that I gave everybody, I can't remember, I think it was like maybe a terabyte of data, and I created this data from samplings here or there of actual data that you would find on computers, and I said, all right, here's data that you typically find on someone's computer. Now, what I want you to do, and the objective of the contest, is to go through this data and deduplicate it, and produce a list, basically, of all the duplicates. And whoever can do it the fastest is a winner. And so we also had different categories, like whoever's code was cleanest, whoever made the best documentation, whoever did it, you know, and generated no errors and followed best practices. In Perl, there's Perl Critic. If you're not familiar with that tool, that you can put your code through Perl Critic. And when you put your code through Perl Critic, it will generate all kinds of warnings and stuff and make you feel bad about yourself and your code because of all kinds of stuff that you didn't know you were supposed to be doing in order to do things right. And part of that is because, at least in my view, I think part of that is because Perl lets you do so much. It basically hands you the car keys when you're 12. If you, it's kind of how I explain what Perl is to people. They complain vociferously that because there aren't stringent rules in the way that Perl makes you write programs, that people behave like a 12-year-old with car keys. You know, they're capable and they can get out there, and a 12-year-old can drive a car, but maybe, you know, shouldn't. And until you know, they have a little bit more experience under their belt. And so a lot of people take the approach that, well, okay, because we have folks that want to program, we're going to give them the most stringent rules and make everybody drive a bumper car. And that's the philosophy of several programming languages, and they brag about it. They're like, we're very pleased that our motto, unlike Perl, is that you can only do it one way. In Perl, the motto of Perl is there's more than one way to do it, and you can choose how to do it. You can choose how to do it in a way that makes sense to you in your brain, and after that, after you've solved the problem, you can iterate on it and go back and optimize it and tune it and make it yours and make it faster and make it better. And some people don't like that. some people want to say, well, we've been doing this for 50 years, 70 years, 80 years. We've been doing these things. We've been writing algorithms for a long time. And because we've done that, we've already worked out all the bugs. We know the mistakes that people make, and they should just do it like X or Y. And if they do, then things will be fast, things will be okay, and you won't end up with spaghetti code and programs that don't make sense to anyone except for the author. In other words, write-only code. And John, it's good to see you. John Dexter is here with us. So we've got the Hangout rolling. I don't know if you got the invite when you were on the road. Yeah. So several times in meetings, I'll discuss this aspect of Perl, and that Perl will let you do whatever you want in many ways. Perl will give you all kinds of rope that you can hang yourself with, or a really sharp sword that you can cut yourself with. But, you know, like a really sharp sword, Perl is really cool. So learning how to use that implement and use it well is of importance if you want to be able to write stuff that's scalable, if you want to be able to write software that's amazing and that other people can come in behind you and look at it and say, oh, okay, I know what that does. Instead of, oh my gosh, that looks like printer line noise. Or, oh my gosh, what were you thinking when you wrote that? Or you got to be kidding me. So we had this hackathon, winter 2013, and we let people do it the way they wanted to do it. There's more than one way to do it, and so we had some people come in and optimize and optimize and optimize, and we had some people approach it differently. Instead of using data structures like hashes, they wanted to use something like Bloom tables. Whoever's listening, you know who you are. It was an awesome idea. Turns out that a guy named Yannick won it, and gee, I should invite him to this hangout. I'm going to do that really quick. Sorry, Yannick. Yannick won it, and later after he won it, I produced some reference code and gave it out to people as an example of, here's an idea of how you can do this, and you can use this as an example. And some people used it as something to build on, and other people didn't. A lot of people just went off on their own and did their own thing. And it turns out that after everybody was done, I forked my own code, optimized the snot out of it, and used some memoization hashing techniques, and I was able to beat the fastest time. I don't think I told Yannick that, though. I'm not sure if I told Yannick. But I whooped his code pretty good, which is amazing because he whooped everybody else's code really well. He really knocked it out of the ballpark. Yannick did something awesome. And you can go back and you can look at the videos about that. But it was a fun hackathon, just because it was a mental exercise and there was competition. But this time it's different. This time our hackathon isn't the same. And the reason why it's not the same is because we're doing this for other folks. That's my aim. And so here in our meeting, I'm going to lay out what this hackathon is about, what the goal is, you know, what we're going to do. We're not going to be deduplicating a terabyte of data. And I'm going to say, you know, what kind of rules we're going to have, and I'm going to talk about timelines and whatnot. Some of you guys might be interested in doing it. Some of you guys out on the internet might be interested in doing it. For folks that don't want to compete, I'm asking for people to help me out in administrative things. As folks who will volunteer as a judge to look at people's code or execute people's code. So I'll dig down. John Dexter knows quite a bit more about it than other folks, as he's had the inside track. I've been bouncing ideas off of him. A month or two ago, we've been talking our group about an initiative that we've come to call the One Perl Per Child Project, or OPPC. I made a website, oppcproject.org, and you can look at that. OPPC is an idea that we want to develop completely free curriculum and give it away to educators and anybody else who's interested in teaching the program. And it's made with a specific target audience, and that's children. The reason why I even came up with the idea about this is because I have children and I see what they do. They're going to school, and when they go to school, they're given digital devices. Here you can go in the lab. You can use the computer. Sometimes they'll give kids Chromebooks that they can take home, and they'll use these and be good digital citizens, is what they call digital citizenship. So that's a word now, folks. Digital citizenship. Do you have good digital citizenship? Are you a good digital citizen? Do you always turn on the blinker before you hit backspace? No, that my kids come home, and so they're using these devices, but they don't know how they work. They don't know how they work, and they don't know what's going on under the covers. And there are a couple teachers that I have a lot of respect for in my children's school that try to teach them a little bit of JavaScript, but it's not. I mean, they're barely scratching the surface of what you can actually teach a child, and a lot of people underestimate a child's capacity to learn and understand. Going beyond that, with the OPPC project, we aren't necessarily trying to just help kids here in Texas or Wyoming or Idaho in the U.S. We're trying to help kids everywhere, which is why we want to make it completely free and give it away so that people can use it in other languages. For example, let's say in Spanish or in Korean. We want people to be able to use this in other countries as well because it's free. And we've even talked about making a piece of hardware that a teacher can bring into a room that will act as kind of like a hotspot, Wi-Fi hotspot that the kids can connect to and use it as a learning device. How would that work? Well, here we go. That's what this hackathon is about, guys. Hope I haven't lost your attention by now. The hackathon aims to do one thing. What we're going to do in this hackathon is we're going to create a secure and fast web service that people can hit a web page, type Perl code into it, and look at the output when it's executed. This presents all kinds of horrible security scenarios because Perl will reach out to whatever operating system it's on and write files, make system calls, send emails. You can create forks of processes. You can do things that are malicious. You can use Perl to attack other servers or attack the machine that it's already on. For example, if somebody wanted to, they could write 10 programs that did nothing but fork and fork and fork and fork until the server fell apart. And so what do? Well, as a system administrator, I know a little bit about how to mitigate situations like that. And what I'm going to do is we're going to marry two worlds together. From my side, I'm going to provide people, each contestant will have a virtual private server. And in that virtual private server, they will get to spin up an instance of Perl with Perl Brew. And they will be able to run their application there in Perl Brew, or else they can run it in a Docker container inside that virtual private server. Containerization is a type of virtualization, but it doesn't work like normal virtualization in like VMware. Containerization in Docker specifically lets you containerize processes and put a process, virtualize just that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide people with a Perl container. I'm going to base it off of the official Perl image that's at Docker Hub right now. So with that Perl container, I'm going to use the LXC driver. I'm not sure if you looked at that. See, the default Docker driver is libcontainer, and the other libcontainer and LXC is not deprecated. No, LXC is an alternative, and I would like to see a convergence of the world of those two ideas there. The reason why we're going to go with LXC is because LXC lets you do lets you do something really cool with libseccomp, in that you can tell that container that it has a whitelist of system calls. Problem solved. You see? If I put Perl in a container and I tell that container that it can't open up sockets and it can't open up files, and I would like to allow people to at least open up a file. The kernel call would be fcmtl. And you would need to be a system administrator with intimate knowledge, or at least an engineer or a system administrator, somebody with an intimate knowledge of the Linux kernel that we're going to run this on. So you would know what system calls Perl needs to make in order to be functional and to do difficult Perl things. We want kids to be able to hit a web page, type in Perl code, see the output, make sure that the syntax is correct, get help with errors, warnings, what have you. And we want to be able to do it so that people can't go and hit the web page and type in code that says basically sleep 1 million and just keep making processes that do sleep. Well, I can tell libseccomp that it's not allowed to do usleep. Problem solved. So what made me think about this is that there are websites right now where you can go and pick from a variety of languages and do what I'm talking about. But they're not free. They're not free, and they're kind of expensive, actually. And companies use these to do things like job interviews, where they'll log in and people will look at things interactively. They'll watch somebody type in code, and people can watch each other screen there on the website via WebSockets. Perl developers doing web applications are going to know a little bit about WebSockets. But that's the interactive thing where people can watch other people program at the same time isn't part of the scope of the hackathon. We just want to get a working implementation where people can run Perl code in a web page and do so without sending email to someone, turning the server into a spam machine. And so what we'll do is we'll use what I'm talking about. I'm going to give people a container. Every contestant will get a virtual machine. I think probably I'll give everybody a couple gigs or 4 gigs of RAM. I've got 128 gigs to play with, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But they'll get elevated privileges so that they can run Docker daemons and that they can make calls out to this, make calls out to the container. And the way that I envision it is that we'll have a persistent Perl process running on that Linux host, or Linux virtual private server, or virtual server, VM, whatever you want to call it, instance. And the app can either run in that, or else you can containerize the app. I've told people, or I've written in the rules that optionally you can use a database if you want to maintain state in your application. But for a web application where you'd use a framework like Modulicious, Joel Berger, I'm talking to you. John Fields, yeah, you're a Mojo head. Catalyst, Dancer. If you're using a web framework like this, critique it's not like regular CGI. Like 90s. We're not talking about programs that execute once per web call, where Apache would hand off a web request to something written in another language like Perl or a PHP file that would execute in an interpreter and do stuff with the input that it got from that web page and then spit out HTML. The web applications that folks are building today in Perl are kind of like Ruby on Rails or Python's Django framework, where you've got an MVC, full-blown model view controller kind of thing, where you've got templating, database stuff, really simple, where folks have gone out of their way to make it easy for you to write a web application without getting down into the nitty-gritty of the things that actually become pitfalls. Folks who start rolling their own parsing of input parameters and stuff that were given to the application. people that basically try to rewrite CGI. And that's fine if you want to do that, but there's a safe way to do that, and those libraries are always, improved upon and what have you. And while I said there is more than one way to do things, people have been doing more than one way to do it as far as web application frameworks for a while, and the frameworks are great. So I'm going to encourage people to use something like Modulicious or Dancer, a framework of your choice to create the web application. Optionally, you can use a database. I want that containerized as well for security purposes. If you guys are following along, is it making sense what I'm saying about containers? Have you guys heard about containers?
No, but I kind of for the safe environment.
Have you heard about containers? Oh, you use them a lot? Is it okay to say where you work? No? Okay, we won't. That's fine. Well, Pratik uses containers where he works, so he's familiar with that. That's fine. So yes, containerization is a cool thing based on an Intel architecture type of thing. i386, no. AMD 64, which is kind of Intel's, stolen from Intel, given back. Processors have had the ability for a while to do something called C groups, and we use that in container-based virtualization. And those via C groups, you can tell a container how much RAM it has. You can tell it how much processor resources it's allowed to do. You can throttle the I/O that it does. It's ridiculously awesome what you can do with containerization because of the robust nature of C groups. And C groups continue to get more and more attention right now in the Linux kernel, and newer kernels are able to do newer and better things as well. So the virtual machines that we hand off to other folks are going to have a modern kernel. You can run the operating system of your choice, but the one that I provide for you, unless you roll it yourself, is going to be Debian 8 stable branch, because that's what I want to do. It's Debian's philosophy is all free, everything. It's not proprietary or license encumbered like some enterprise Linux distributions. So that's based on Libre, FLOSS, and open source, and the Pro license, artistic license. That's what I've decided to advocate for is virtual machine. So I promised everybody that I would tell them about the hardware that would be running the virtual machine or the hackathon. And what I plan to do, what I've done is draft some emails that I'm going to send out to prominent companies to request sponsorships and assistance. And I'm going to ask some popular cloud providers if they're willing to provide some instances for a couple months for free for the hackathon, because of the nature, because it's to benefit what's actually a charity without 501c3 status. But if if sponsors will come to play ball and help out with that, then I won't manage the hardware myself. Otherwise, I've built a server that will run the virtual machines just fine. And I promised folks that I would show that to them, so I'm going to pull it up, and if you're on the Hangout, you'll get to see the spreadsheet. Sorry, screen deck, slide deck. So let me know if you can see this, guys, if you can see the slide presentation. Can you see that? Okay. What I'm saying here on the slide deck is that this is the stuff in the slide deck. This is not Perl stuff yet, and the reason why is because nothing's running on it for the hackathon. And nothing's running on it for the hackathon because some of the pieces are still on the floor in my lab. I'm putting it together. So it may or may, like I said, it may or may not be the platform that runs the virtual machines, but based on sponsorships. And I've gotten some I've had some people express some interest in it. So I think we might get some cool sponsors behind this. And when I say sponsors, I'm not asking people for money. I'm just asking people to provide employees time. Say, yeah, I'll allow my employee to work on this for 20 hours, and or else, yes, we'll provide a virtual private server for you in our cloud, and you guys can use this in exchange for our branding of the hackathon, like Pearl Shop did for us last time. So the server that I'm making, it uses this Super Micro Enterprise motherboard right there. Probably not. I mean, I know you guys are Pearl folks, but I promised I'd show it to you. I put it in this banana for scale. The banana, full-size bananas actually looks about like that size compared to the case. And that's not what's in our case. This is just an example of the Corsair 900D. I have kids, and when my 9-year-old stands next to it, it's, just... well, it's as high as the tire. It's about that big off the ground. It's about that wide in front right there. I'm using my hands. Sorry, you guys can't see. But it's got a lot of room, and I've actually run into a problem because of that. I'm gonna tell you in a minute. Gigawatts. The power supply in it's got 1,000 watts. I think that's probably gonna be enough. I think it'll be enough to support the peripherals and the RAM. If it's not, then I'll get more. But I mean, I don't see that. So far, it doesn't look like it's going to be inadequate. It'll have dual, or it already does. I've got the Xeons in there. Some E5 class Enterprise Xeons. And I might overclock them just for fun. We'll see. You don't really need to, these guys. Geez, what it comes down to after I put those in and after hyper-threading is, I think, it's 28 virtual processors. It's like crazy. Right now I've got 8 cores in my main rig at home, and there's like an i7 that I put together several years ago. I'm like, this is so awesome! I've got 8 cores. Well, now I've got 28 cores. You know that picture, John? Yeah, that's so yeah, this does not matter really, except for that it's nice to be able to offload some processing to the GPU. I'm putting that in it, the 4 gigabytes of DDR5, and it comes overclocked. So that's NVIDIA chipset on that. Linus is expressing his love for NVIDIA in this picture. There's so much RAMness. I'm going to put 128 gigs in it. It's PC3 overclocked RAM, or it will be after I play with it. And I won't leave it that way. I just want to see what it can do. It's already fast enough. DDR3, ECC registered, so it'll correct memory errors. We won't have data corruption and all that stuff. The actual operating system that's going to be the hypervisor that runs all the virtual machines, it's going to be running on a SanDisk Extreme Pro, a couple of those, which is the fastest consumer grade SSD that you can buy right now. Really high performance. And then I'm going to, also in the case, I've got 8 of these drives right here, Western Digital Blacks, which are enterprise drives that are meant to be on all the time. So each one's a terabyte. We've got 8 spindles, and I'm going to put it in a ZFS RAID array. Not sure if you guys know about ZFS, but you can Google it later. ZFS is awesome for many reasons. What? Your home NAS? Are you using FreeNAS? Yeah. Cool. Cool, very cool. So that's going to be fast. and I'll be able to snapshot everything that everybody's doing. So if somebody, accidentally destroys their virtual machine, then you can send me an email and I'll just roll you back to 5 minutes ago, for example. It's an enterprise server. I should be using fans, right? Well, I am, but they're on radiators that are liquid cooled. I couldn't help myself. I needed to do this, guys. I needed to do this because while it is a server and it's got all kinds of enterprise components, starting from the motherboard and the RAM and the processors, I still wanted to kind of trick it out. The liquid cooling, I've got an EK Predator 360 for each processor, which 360 is probably just fine for one i7 processor that are hotter than Xeons, and you can add 2 GPU water blocks to that to cool, some shotgun GPUs, shotgun graphics card in SLI mode. So just one 360 will cool all of that in your box, and your MOSFET on the motherboard if you want to. You can get kits for that. But the EK360 is really cool, and I got 2. So it's basically an all-in-one cooling unit. It's not a custom cooling unit, but it's not going to stay an all-in-one unit for me, unfortunately. This is where my evil genius fell apart at this point in my design. Everything else has come together fine. But you can see in this case right here on the screen how they've got this EK360 mounted up against the top right there in the case. That's the radiator at the top. And underneath it you can see tubing going down to a processor on the motherboard. That's constantly exchanging liquid via a pump that flows up into that radiator and then back in and out constantly in a loop. And above that radiator, what you don't see are 3 high static pressure fans, high static pressure fans that are industrial grade. They were also part of that EK Predator unit. Basically, these are just really awesome, nice stuff. One EK Predator is like $200. But it's really cool stuff. The problem I got into is that I've got mine mounted up in the top of the case that I showed you guys, and it's connected to processor number 2, but processor number 1, well, in the case that I have, let's go back quick. Let's see if I can go back. Okay, here in the case, you can actually see in this case, if you look closely, that there's an EKWB radiator, EK water block right up here. They're a company in Slovenia, so if you ever need help, it's all email based and it's slow. I'm working with them right now on my problem. But you can see this guy's got his liquid cooling up here, his radiator, and then the fans right there under that they're connected to the radiator. Well, there's only one other place for another radiator that size, and that's down here at the bottom where you see the 4 fans down there at the bottom, the Corsair right there, the Corsair fans. The fans that I've got for the case are quite a bit nicer than the stock Corsair fans. But that's the only place you can put a radiator is down there. You have 4 places for 120 millimeter fans, and in those 4 places, that's where you put a radiator that's that big. They call it a 480 size radiator or the 360 size radiator that comes on the Predator. And the reason why you can't use a 480 size Predator is because, 1, they don't make them, and because it's an all-in-one unit. 2, the all-in-one unit comes pre-packaged with a little pump and a reservoir out to the side of it. So you have your radiator, and then at the end of the radiator there's a compact reservoir and a compact pump, and you can't even really tell what it is. You just know that you put it in there, you put the thermal paste on the CPU, you smack it down on the CPU via the screws, and you're done. Connect the fan to a power supply, and you've got liquid cooling going on in your server. Well, I mounted my other Predator down here where these other fans are, you see on the bottom of the case, and
Has anybody seen a problem yet? That it doesn't reach up to the other CPU. The reason why I decided to go with the cooling for the server that for the hackathon with the 360 is because the 360 has what, they make up fancy words for every single feature. EK is very Apple-y in that way. Like if you look at this slide, you can see they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things talking about. We've got Vardar fans. What's a Vardar fan? It's something that they made up. It has to do with the name for a wind in the Mediterranean. It's supposed to be a cool wind. You can see it over there. Over there in Slovenia, they know about that and we don't. And okay, well, they've got Coolstream something. What's Coolstream? And Hovercore? What? Okay, so they've also got this little thing right here in the hose that allows you to uncouple the hose right there. Basically, pop the hose in half. Well, why would you want to do that? Because then you can add accessories to your all-in-one system, like what they call QDC, Quick Disconnect Enabled Graphics Block. So you can say, all right, I want to put a graphics block in my loop. Now we're cooling the CPU and the graphics block because you can hook it up to that QDC thing. It goes, pops apart, puts back together, and you don't lose a drop of coolant, or two. Not that much. It's pretty clean. So I thought, well, I'll just buy 2 of these, connect them together, and then I'll have redundant pumps. So in case one fails, you're not in trouble. Which is the problem with liquid cooling. If the pump fails, then you can't cool anymore in your host. So people put in redundant pumps, and I'm like, I've got redundant pumps now. I'm just going to connect these 2 in a loop. We'll have liquid cool server, and everything will be fine. But since I mounted it down at the bottom of the case, my hoses are too short. My tubing is too short. Let me open that again. Well, up here. I can't even find that play button. So I've got my radiator down here where the fans are, and I can't reach up to the top. So I'm ordering some custom tubing and another reservoir so I can bleed the loop, and I think that'll work. The reservoir has a pump in it as well. Lose more money on that, but less money than I would if I returned them both and paid for shipping. Yeah, I was. Did it lose it?
Yeah.
I thought we were showing the slides. This whole time nobody was seeing slides? I asked you guys to tell me if you could see the slides.
I did.
Oh gosh, well you gotta, tell me. I thought I was showing slides.
Yeah.
Guys, I am so sorry. You guys, I wonder how many people are just gonna stop watching at that point and say this guy's a dork. Well, okay. For those who are watching on it, can you see it now when it's not in presentation?
Yeah.
Mode? Okay, so that's the motherboard. It's the case. Power supply, processors, GPU, RAM, storage, cooling. So sorry about that. I guess that problem couldn't be helped either. But there you go. That's the server that I've been building and putting together. It's been really fun, but I'm going to be waiting on some more parts to come in before I can get the server online. But once it is online, I will make a formal announcement on perlmonks.org and in Perl IRC. A lot of Perl folks in the Perl community use IRC to communicate because we're worldwide. And since it's, kind of live, lots of people like to jump on IRC and get help and discuss and collaborate that way. And because there's a lot of good stuff that happens on IRC, it makes me feel bad that a lot of employers block IRC because they think it's automatically bad because, bots. But that's really all. I didn't want it to be a long meeting tonight. We are going to be going over code and stuff like that. Not tonight. I just wanted to set forth the rules for the hackathon, basically, or at least the concept. All the rules I have, I'm going to send that out in an email. I'm going to put the rules up on DFW.pm.org. And if you go to our DFW.pm.org, PM for Perl Mongers, then you'll be able to see the rules. Those will be posted soon as I make the announcement. And when I make the announcement, folks will then be able to start sending me an SSH key. They can log into their servers and mess around. If you need help, I will help you. I can help you make an SSH key and log into the server, and I can set up a Perl container for you. Well, I mean, I can set up some things for you. The Perl container that you have will already be provided. That's going to be the same for everybody. When we get into this contest, if it's like last time, there are going to be people who really want to push the envelope. They're going to bring domain knowledge in from the stuff that they've been doing at work, and they're going to say, wow, you know what, I found out I can really optimize the heck out of stuff if I do everything in C. You know, we had a guy who wanted to do that last time we did the contest, and I'm like, it's a Perl contest. And he was like, well, but it's C in Perl. And I thought, you know, okay, fine. You can do that. And, I mean, because there were some people that complained on IRC and said that it wasn't fair, and technically it's Perl. And I'm like, fine, you can compete, and his solution still wasn't the fastest. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Perl compiles to bytecode, machine code, after it's been run through the interpreter. So after you pay the initial penalty of compilation time, you're done. And Perl executes just as fast as anything else, as long as it's written well and you're not doing things that are inefficient and doing bad codeness. So if you've written the Perl well, it's bytecode at that point. Not going to run as fast as assembler, but it's pretty dang fast. Perl is the fastest interpreter right now that you can get on Unix, Linux, I think. Faster than Python. It's definitely faster than Ruby. Perl 5 one-liners are pretty. Say what? I haven't benchmarked that. No. Node or server-side JavaScript very well may be faster, but last time I checked, that wasn't the case. Sorry, guys, Node fans out there. If I'm wrong, send me an email or whatever. Send me some hate mail. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to make this, and the reason why we're making it is because the winning code is going to be donated, because you can't make an entry, you can't enter the contest unless your code is released under the Perl Artistic License, which is basically everything's free no matter what. You can take this and charge money for it. It's my copyright, but you can do whatever you want with it, basically. So we're going to take whatever the winning code was, whatever proves the most fast and the most secure, both. And we're going to create OPPC with that as the bottom underlying framework. And from that, we'll build on. I'll probably take that code base and maybe add some interactivity to it, like I was talking about, and some of the other website services have to do these kind of things. I'll also probably add authentication and user accounts and stuff like that. But after that, once we've got that, then we'll start working on our curriculum, and we'll have something we can start giving out. And I thought that the objective of the hackathon was cool because it's a contest, and Perl programmers love a contest. They love to compete and see who can be the fastest. And there are a lot of guys who, like I said, are going to push the envelope. So I'm excited to see what we get out of this. So I want to thank you for coming tonight, Pratik, Ebony, John Dexter. After this, we'll talk a little bit more about Perl. But this pretty much concludes tonight's meeting announcement for the kickoff. And thanks for watching, everybody who's joined us on YouTube, and Stephen Wiley, who's there. Can you hear me, Stephen? Yeah, he might have been muted. Okay. So that's the end of that. We'll go ahead and open back up to classroom discussion before we take off. So, Pratik, I'm really glad you came tonight. I hope that we get to see you at next month's meeting as well. Naturally, the focus of the next few months' meetings is probably, we're going to dedicate at least some time to this, to talk about this, the stuff that we're working on and whatnot. I'll give people updates about where we are. For folks who are listening, I am asking for people to help me. Last time I did the hackathon, I got a lot of help from Tom Metro out on the East Coast from the Pearl Shop, who's a sponsor and a judge, and that was really helpful. I can't convey how difficult and how much time went into that as far as administering that, judging all the entries, timing all that stuff, and helping people, because folks were logging, at that point they were all logging into the same server and working against the same data set for deduplication, and they would take turns on whose code to execute because some code was really resource intensive. But this time people aren't going to be so constrained. Ebony, I'm glad that you were here as well.
I gave you a chance to learn about Perl.
Unfortunately, I mean, we didn't cover Perl code.
No, that's what my mom, she worked with that skill and was like laying around about Perl. So.
Perl is very different today than it was 10 years ago.
Okay.
Perl, a Perl book that was written 10 years ago is great to get some fundamentals, but Perl has gone crazy awesome since then.
Okay.
A lot of languages have, sprouted up, and the saying is that genius steals. So Perl developers, like I said, there's a really active community behind Perl, and the Perl maintainers, Perl 5 porters, the people that use Perl, the people that create Perl. They're releasing a new version of Perl quite often. I mean, 5.22, 5.23. When we did it was like 5.18 when we did the last hackathon, and they're releasing often and releasing good. And the cool thing about their releases is I haven't seen any backward compatibility, any issues break. Now they did break in 23. They broke my module because my module. Oh, nice. Nice, cool. Well, 5.23 definitely isn't like stable in terms of the version that you're going to see released with Red Hat today or with Debian stable branch. 5.23 is the newest, so they're probably already working on doing that, undoubtedly. But I haven't gotten around to fixing the fact that 5.23 makes my module fail to install because it generates a warning. 5.23 generates a warning if you try to do sysread on a file handle that was opened in UTF-8. So you get a warning, and my module won't even install if it generates a warning. So folks don't have that in their code. But yeah, Ebony Perl is doing some really cool stuff. What would be cool is if you were to Google modern Perl. Just Google that. And the reason why is because people are doing stuff with meta-object stuff for object-oriented programming via Moose or Moo, M-O-O. And it gives you all kinds of syntactic sugar for your code, features that are implemented basically. If you were phrasing it in terms of Linux or Unix, they're implementing features of other languages in runtime code. So they would call that userland instead of kernel space, OS talk. There's a little overhead, but like I said, a lot of this stuff, they have gone back underneath and rewritten the extensions in C really fast, and Perl has always supported C plugins via the XS loader. So you can write C code and then feed it to Perl. so that people can reuse C Perl plugin. Yeah, so Google Modern Perl and dive in, look at new. They just released a new version. Cool. That's awesome.
That'd be a great job on programming. Having good stuff like that.
Yeah, Ebony was saying it sounds like it would be a fun job to be a full-time programmer for a company. Having been a full-time programmer for a company on a couple occasions, it's kind of tough. That's why I decided to do what I do, which is in programming, system administration, because when you're developing for a company, there are always things called deadlines.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was doing a couple of interviews and so how every week.
Oh yeah. Developers are crazy people. Why do you think that they are? I mean, their blood is 50-50 coffee and water.
Yeah, and they weren't at the office at the time. I'm like, oh, so they'll come in a few minutes. 8 o'clock in the morning, it's probably still.
Yeah, developers tend to work. They're most productive around 2 a.m. So.
Oh yeah.
No, seriously, it's crazy. Developing the life as a developer is really cool and really scary, and that varies wildly depending on who you work for. There's some really great companies to work for, and being a developer is really fun to work to be a developer at some companies. But I still have project deadlines and the things that I do. But as a programmer, I'm a very imaginative and a creative type. And so while some people are really great worker bees and they can go in and get stuff done and really just crank out great stuff, great quality code that does great things right from the start, I approach things very eclectically, which is why I have such a love for Perl, is because it lets me program like that and do things strangely and then circle back and fix weirdness, optimize, tune, and because I just think problems and I approach problems differently, and we all approach problems uniquely. I'm not going to even claim to be the only person who does that. We all approach problems uniquely, and that's why I love Perl, and that's why I hate deadlines. Is because when somebody gives me a problem, I can say, well, yeah, I can do that, but I don't like to do that. I like to say, oh, cool, a problem. Let me fix it, and then let me make it elegant, and then let me make it really fast, and let me make it really awesome, and then let me put it in a module, and then after I put it in a module, let me split it into 3 more so that they're pluggable, and now let me release it on the CPAN. And they're like, dude, you were supposed to finish that project 2 months ago. Aw. So me and being a developer, sometimes it's hard for. I mean, if I was a professional developer, I would definitely have to quell those tendencies at work, and not code like that. But when I code, I tend to code artistically, and some people they do things way better than I do as programmers because they're naturally inclined. Their brains can figure out algorithms really quickly. They can look at code and say exactly what the output of that code is going to be. And sometimes when I program, I'll look at my code and I'll have pretty firm expectation of what's supposed to happen. But sometimes I surprise myself. And there are other people who just get it right, bam, right the first time. Their brains are just made extremely analytically. And I'm a creative kind of type, People wonder, why I'm a programmer when I'm a creative type, I'm a musician, for example, and I do that semi-pro, but I love Perl. Interestingly enough, the creator of Perl, Larry Wall, is a aficionado and connoisseur of languages. And so he understands and appreciates the art of linguistics. And that's why Perl, many people say that's why Perl has been so wildly successful for so long. is because of the way that Larry wrote it. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I look forward to jumping in on this hackathon. I'm giving it a lot more lead time than I did last time. In 2013, I announced it, and we started it the same month that I announced it. People were working on it, and I think we ran it for only 1 month, and that was it. But I'm going to give people a lot of time so people can show up late to the game. I think that we'll probably do this in the spring, so that'll give me the chance to finish working on the server, obtain sponsorships, garner more interest, and then everybody can practice and hack away at their code and optimize it, and then we'll execute it. And when we execute the code, I'm also going to attack it. I'm going to come from outside, and I'm going to hit the code with penetration testing tools from Backtrack Linux. And if somebody's implementation falls under that and fails to adequately respond to a security threat, then they won't win. You lose. You made it unsafe. We're done about an hour before we usually are. Does anybody have any questions or things that they wanted to talk about before we draw to a close? Pratik? What did you want, Pratik, what do you want when we meet next month? I hope to see you again. When we meet next month, what would you like to talk about? And what is there anything of particular interest or something that's come up at work that is particularly relevant or something that you want to learn about? Okay. So you like all kinds of topics? What's exciting to you right now with Perl? Perl, if you look at Perl, Perl is a programming language, but Perl is a lot more than a programming language because of all the extensions that people provide, the libraries. So you can take a library that are database libraries. One of that's wildly popular is called DBIX class, and it turns your database programming upside down, inside out, and lets you program SQL. It lets you program SQL and stop writing queries inside your code. It lets you work with SQL as if it was an object. And it's really awesome. And so you have an entire community in Perl that does very little except talk about DBIC or DBIC because it's fantastic. And then you have an entire community of people around the meta object Perl programming that I talked about. There's one called Moo. There's one called Moose. There's one called Moops. That's really cool because it implements all kinds of really cool, or it gives you all kinds of really cool syntactic sugar, where you can say class this, and you can put all kinds of extra namespaces in and signatures and stuff like that. There's also P5 MOP, which is an effort for, is it still in development? I can't answer that question. I hope so. I hope so. I don't know if people are still pursuing that or if people are just like me, very satisfied that we have like Moose and Moo and Moops. P5 MOP was basically an attempt that might still be ongoing. I apologize for my lack of awareness about it. But P5 MOP was an attempt to do what people are doing in runtime code and put it into the core, put it in the Perl core, so that it was part of the language, and that you could get all of that extra goodness. Because Perl programming, when you want to do Perl programming in an object-oriented fashion, and if you ever do anything to scale, instead of programming procedurally, you need to do it in an object-oriented manner. And so many people program in languages that are object-oriented from the bottom up. There's not a language that I know of that is not object-oriented, except Haskell. I mean, it's a functional programming language. But what I'm talking about is, somebody wants to pick up a language and write something in that language. Um, you're looking at C, Java, C Sharp, Perl, Python, Ruby, Go, Dart, and Node, JavaScript. So out of all those ones that we named, C Sharp and Java and C++ and Perl and Python and Ruby and Go and Dart and JavaScript are all object-oriented. Doesn't have to be. We're kind of like Perl. Oh, really? Then I apologize for that as well. I wonder what Go is going to do in the future. There are a few things that are written in Go. There's also Erlang, and there's Lisp. We've got languages like that. Some of them, their strengths are like threading. Perl threading is not a strength. Perl does much better with forking, although there are some really big fans of Perl threading. I found myself, side by side, that forking is much easier to manage than a bunch of threads. I've written threaded code, and it's fun, but shared threads in Perl is something that's difficult to do right. It's difficult. You end up reinventing the wheel by freezing and thawing serialized data structures in order to communicate between threads, and it's crazy. And when you're doing that, you've done it wrong. When your threads can't talk like they should, and you're using freeze or storable in order to create fake mutexes, it's just that you've totally kludged it and you've bombed the entire objective if you're doing that. And so you want to do MapReduce, for example. You've got a job, and you've got the MapReduce algorithm where you take your job and you split it up into tasks and you fork that off to a bunch of little workers. And the workers crunch on their little job, and what they arrive at the end, they then give back to the master, who reduces that data set and basically says, all right, thanks everybody for participating. You just kind of like crowdsourced my job for me, and this is the output that you were looking for. Starward, my friend. So I did MapReduce in forking and threading, and you need to be able, when you are in Perl and you're forking, you can communicate from from parent to child to parent a lot easier than you can with thread. Some people will argue that that's absolutely insanely false, but that's just been my experience every time. Again, I'm not the expert. I'm not an expert. I'm just a very passionate Perl advocate and enthusiast, and I'm in love with Perl for many years. So next month, I think let's dedicate some time to talking about Perl's meta-object protocols. We'll talk a little bit about MOOCs and about the cool, awesome stuff that you can do with that. Because if you're writing procedural Perl at work, or else if you're using classic Perl object orientation, there are reasons to do that. A couple of my libraries just do that exclusively, classic Perl object orientation. Many people are very vocal critics of it, because classic Perl object orientation as an implementation was very lacking in robustness compared to what you can have from other languages. And so, like I said, people stole from those other languages and said, okay, fine, you can do that in Ruby, then we're going to do it in Perl. And they went to Perl and they made Perl do it. And so now, if you're programming in Perl and you just at the top of your program, by virtue of the fact that you say use move, now you can do all kinds of cool stuff that Perl couldn't ever do before by itself. You can treat your program like an object and run your program as a modulino. We can talk about modulinos. we'll talk a little bit about that, more updates about the hackathon. I'm really hoping that this gets some traction. The hackathon, I'm really hoping that we garner some interest like we did last time. Last time for the hackathon, we had people in Canada who were helping out. We had people on the East Coast, people on the West Coast. There's a guy in Australia. We had folks in Europe and a guy from South America as well. I'm not sure if there was a continent that wasn't represented. So I really hope that we get the same kind of excitement out of this. I'm concerned though, because this isn't a purely Perl thing. What we're talking about now is in a Perl thought exercise, where you can say, okay guys, write FizzBuzz for me. You know, is the number divisible by 2? Then say fizz. You know, if not, say buzz. We're asking people to write a web application, which requires some understanding of operating systems, web protocols, HTTP, you know, reverse proxying, to class maybe, PSGI, containerization. What the heck? We might end up with people who would have otherwise been interested, throw up their hand and say, I'm a Perl programmer, I don't do that. But I'm not. I have an expectation that's not quite going to be the case with most folks, because most folks who program in Perl are multidisciplinary, and by virtue of the fact that they're very versatile, they usually come pre-packaged with knowledge about a lot of other things. Remember when I asked you what you do? You said, you know, you're like HTML, CSS. I'm like, well, that's not programming.
Oh.
No, it's not. HTML and CSS isn't programming at all. But it's glued to web programming. So when you said that, I'm like, oh, cool. So she has an understanding of, of web programming. And you understand, after a program executes, what kind of output it needs to generate to display something in a web browser that's meaningful to someone. Because you can style things. You can style things with CSS.
Yeah.
You can write HTML, so you can make things in color, bold, italic. You can arrange things and say go to the left, go to the right. You can create really awesome stuff. Even animations with CSS.
Yeah.
So, an understanding. Perl people come with that kind of knowledge. The Perl person is going to understand HTTP. They're going to understand web apps. Perl people are all often very seasoned in their understanding of databases as well. Folks who understand Perl are very often multidisciplinary. Why do you think that is? I don't know. It is a glue language was the answer from John Dexter. Perl has often been called a glue language, and it does glue a lot of stuff together. Glue is the internet. And PHP tries to rip it apart. Every once in a while, in the very dark corners of the internet, you'll find some cool fusion in ASPX.net.
Oh, yeah?
ASPX.net. Fine. I know. That's cool. We love you guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Thanks for participating. Send us your emails to dfw.perlmongers.org or join our mailing list. You can join the mailing list by going to dfw.pm.org, and all the information's right there, so you can get the meeting announcements. It's a non-commercial mailing list, low volume, and typically the only thing you're going to see on there is Perl discussion and meeting announcements. So I encourage everybody who's watching and here to join the mailing list as well. We'll see you guys next month.